The ballroom glistened like a dream, chandeliers dripping in crystal, champagne flowing like water, and laughter echoing through marble columns. It was the annual Liberty Gala, a high society fundraiser known as much for its elegance as for its political undertones. Dignitaries, celebrities, senators, and socialites mingled beneath banners that read freedom, justice, honor. But beneath the glamour, tension pulsed like an undercurrent waiting to break the surface. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett arrived alone, dressed in a satin emerald gown that shimmered beneath the light. She moved with grace, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the room like a strategist. Though she had attended many political events before, tonight felt different, too curated, too choreographed. And she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. On the opposite side of the hall stood Vice President JD Vance, surrounded by donors and old-money aristocrats. He was charming, calculated, and confident in his navy tuxedo. The room seemed to tilt toward him, cameras, conversations, power. But his gaze briefly flickered toward Jasmine as she entered. Just a second, but enough. The host of the evening, a polished billionaire philanthropist named Charles Whitmore, took the stage with his signature martini and megawatt smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are gathered tonight not just in celebration, but in remembrance of the values that built this great nation. Liberty, law, leadership." Polite applause followed, but Jasmine didn't clap. Her instincts had been honed over years in courtrooms and on congressional floors, and they were telling her something wasn't right. Then it happened. A sudden hush fell over the room as Whitmore's smile widened. "Before we continue," he said, "I'd like to address something delicate. It has come to our attention that one of our guests, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, may have improperly used funds from last year's Justice Fund for personal expenses." A gasp rippled through the audience. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move, didn't blink. Whitmore continued, "We are not here to pass judgment, of course, but transparency demands clarity. And tonight, in front of all of you, we offer Congresswoman Crockett the chance to respond." All eyes turned to her. Dozens of powerful figures, donors, press, and politicians. Phones discreetly raised. The room transformed into a courtroom, without due process. Jasmine slowly stepped forward, her heels echoing across the marble floor. She didn't take the microphone. She didn't need to. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear enough to silence the room. "This isn't about funds," she said. "It's about fear. Some people in this room are afraid of the truth I speak, the questions I raise, and the systems I challenge." A few heads turned uncomfortably. JD Vance crossed his arms. "And if you think shaming me publicly will quiet me, then you've never listened to a word I've said." Silence. The opening move had been made, but the battle had just begun. For a moment, the silence felt deafening. Cameras flashed like lightning bugs in a summer storm as Jasmine stood at the center of the ballroom, every step she took echoing off the marble floor like a drumbeat of defiance. She didn't glance around for approval. She didn't search for allies. She was standing alone, but not unarmed. JD Vance, still across the room, leaned in to whisper something to a nearby aide. Then, stepping forward slightly, he addressed the room. "I think the Congresswoman deserves a chance to clarify," he said, voice measured and smooth. "We're all here tonight because we care about justice. Let's hear her side." To some, it sounded diplomatic. To Jasmine, it was a setup. She turned toward JD slowly, her voice calm but cutting. "Mr. Vice President, what you call clarification, I call public execution dressed up in manners." Gasps again. Nervous laughter from a few donors. One senator shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jasmine reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I came prepared," she said, unfolding it, "because I had a feeling something like this might happen. This is a signed statement from the Justice Fund's treasurer, dated and notarized, confirming that all expenditures under my name were reviewed and approved. Every dime accounted for." She held the paper up. A photographer zoomed in. Phones captured every angle. The tension in the room began to buckle. The accusation hadn't just lost its weight, it had started to boomerang. Whitmore, still on stage, shifted uneasily. His smile, once gleaming, now looked more like a mask slipping under heat. Jasmine continued. "But let's be honest, this was never about numbers, was it?" Her voice sharpened. "This was about silencing a voice that speaks too plainly. One that doesn't flatter billionaires or smooth over injustice." JD interrupted, his tone tighter now. "No one's trying to silence you, Congresswoman. But public trust matters. And even the appearance of misconduct deserves scrutiny. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. I agree. Which is why I've already requested an independent audit. And when that clears me publicly, I expect just as much airtime for the truth as you gave the accusation. Some clapped. Others exchanged glances. JD Vance stayed silent. And then it shifted. A woman in a navy gown stood up from the back of the room. She was older, graceful, and clearly not a politician. My name is Ruth Daniels, she said. I'm a retired librarian. Last year, my grandson was one of the kids helped by the Justice Fund when his school ran out of supplies. That money made sure he had books to read. If Rep. Crockett is the reason my grandson had a chance to learn, then she deserves a thank you, not an ambush. Applause broke out, not thunderous but sincere. A ripple of clarity in a room thick with confusion. JD Vance looked rattled now. The plan, whatever it was unraveling. Jasmine Crockett stood taller, her eyes scanning the crowd. She hadn't just defended herself. She had turned the gala into a courtroom. And won. As the applause slowly faded, a hush returned to the room, but not the kind born of tension. This silence was thoughtful, charged with respect. Jasmine Crockett stood still for a moment, allowing the weight of truth to settle into every corner of that grand ballroom. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply breathed. JD Vance adjusted his cufflinks. His expression was unreadable, but his posture had shifted. For a man who often commanded rooms, tonight he had been outmaneuvered, not by aggression but by presence. By clarity. By facts. Charles Whitmore took the microphone again, his voice no longer booming, but strained. Well, thank you, Congresswoman Crockett, for your remarks, he said, his charisma now threadbare. Transparency, of course, is always welcome. But no one clapped this time. The crowd had heard enough from him. It was Ruth Daniels, still standing, who spoke again. You know, she said with calm authority, we came here to celebrate liberty. And tonight, I saw more liberty in the courage of one woman than in all the speeches combined. Applause rose again, this time fuller, freer. Even some of those who had once kept their distance now nodded in Jasmine's direction. JD Vance took a few steps closer toward her. He didn't offer an apology. This wasn't that kind of moment. But he did speak, and it was different from before. Congresswoman, he said carefully, public opinion is a storm. You stood in it tonight and didn't flinch. I may not agree with you often, but I respect what you did. Jasmine looked at him, her voice even. Respect doesn't need agreement, Mr. Vice President. It needs honesty. Their eyes met. Briefly. Not as allies, but no longer as opponents. The gala resumed, at least in form. Music returned. Servers passed around champagne and desserts. But the tone had shifted. Conversations became softer. Eyes glanced more often at Jasmine than at any of the gala's celebrity guests. The headlines were already forming in newsrooms across the country. Crockett turns accusation into triumph. Justice Fund scandal debunked live. One woman stood, and the room listened. As the event drew to a close, Jasmine slipped out quietly, ignoring the cameras waiting outside. She didn't need sound bites. She had said everything that mattered. Outside the Grand Hotel, the night air was cool and quiet. A black car waited by the curb. Before getting in, Jasmine paused, looking up at the stars, distant, steady, unbothered by all the noise below. She whispered to no one in particular, let them come. Because she had learned something important. In a world eager to tear down those who challenge power, survival isn't about shouting louder. It's about standing longer. And standing, even when the room tries to crush you. Especially then. In a world where power often hides behind polished words and curated applause, Jasmine Crockett chose a different path. One of unshakable presence. That night at the Liberty Gala, she didn't just defend herself from a carefully orchestrated smear. She redefined what it means to show courage in a room that's built to break it. Surrounded by chandeliers and silver trays, whispered alliances and sharp-eyed spectators, she did the unthinkable. She stood alone, armed only with truth, and truth was enough. The attack wasn't just personal, it was strategic. They didn't expect her to be ready. They didn't expect her to bring facts. And they certainly didn't expect her to turn a moment of public shame into one of quiet revolution. But Crockett didn't perform. She didn't play to the crowd. She spoke for the unseen, the unheard, the ones outside that ballroom who rarely get invited in. And in doing so, she reminded the nation that integrity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through clenched teeth. Sometimes it walks in heels across cold marble unshaken. Sometimes it just stands because that's all that's needed. Leadership isn't about making people comfortable. It's about making truth unavoidable. And that night, Jasmine Crockett didn't just win back her name. She carved it into the conscience of a nation.